This program has been approved for one IDCEC CEU. To receive credit for this program, please submit your full name, IDCEC number, program class code, and your summary essay to ceu@iida.org. The program class code is located alongside the title of this program on the IIDA Academy page. For a certificate of completion to use toward another certifying body, please submit the same information to ceu@iida.org. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl Durst. I'm the Executive Vice President and CEO of IIDA, and it is indeed an honor and a pleasure to welcome you to today's program. I love this series. Presented by KI, our partners for this series. We have already had in our earlier iteration, this is second in a three-part series, and we are talking about evolution in education. And this series features viewpoints not only from designers, but from end users and stakeholders, and that makes this a particularly compelling series. So I think we are ready to get started. So just so we manage some expectations here, this is how the time ahead of us will flow. We're going to have a moderated panel discussion for about 45 minutes or so. We'll move into some Q&A and some audience participation. We'll do a wrap, and then at the end of the program, we'll share a QR code so that you can get continuing education credit for this program. I'd like to introduce my co-moderator for today's program, Jonathan Mata, who is the National Education Leader for KI. Hey, Jonathan.
Cheryl, thank you for having me, and thank you for being a part of, well, not a part, the leader of this, and having KI be a part of it. It's always a great a joy for us, so thank you.
Tell us who our panelists are, Jonathan. I think you're introducing a couple of them.
Absolutely. I have the great pleasure of introducing Colt Brock, Lake Highlands High School alumni. He's currently a student of architecture at Georgia Tech, along with Casey Gray, the associate principal at Lakelands High School, Richardson Independent School District, or Richardson ISD. Colt and Casey, welcome.
Perfect. Hey, Colton, Casey, and last but certainly not least, I'm really honored to introduce Adelia Schlois. She is VP and Director of Education Interiors at HKS. Hi there, and welcome, Adelia.
Hi.
And let's get started and dive in. I'm excited to, Jonathan and I are excited to talk about this project, particularly around the stakeholder aspects of it. This project has a really good story, but let's just get started. This year has just been rife with change and revelation and resilience and flexibility, I think, for all of us. Casey, particularly as an administrator, we're so happy that you're joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about Lake Highlands High School and its student population and the campus?
Absolutely. And Cheryl, thank you guys so much for inviting me to be a part of this. I always love to sit back and talk about Lake Highlands. We love our community. So Lake Highlands High School is a fantastic community. And the one thing you're going to hear me say a lot today is going to be the word community, because we really are all in one. We are a community that cares about its students. We care about everything. I mean, the students, the parents, the kids, they all work together to accomplish so many wonderful things. And so our school is a huge school. We have about 3,000 students. We have the full gamut when it comes to the socioeconomic status. We have the students that are the richest of the rich, and we have the students that are not. The ones that, we have students that will get dropped off in a $100,000 car leaving $1 million home, and we have students that come from a homeless shelter. So we really have all aspects of every student, and it really makes for just an awesome experience for all kids to be able to work together and learn how to be one campus.
That's great. That's great. And the mascot, go Wildcats, am I right?
Wildcats, that's
All
correct.
right, all
Yes,
right.
ma'am.
I had to work that in, right?
Yeah, no, no,
It's a Texas thing, right?
it is.
Adelia, can you tell us a little bit about your history with the Richardson School District and just your initial engagement with the high school?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had a longstanding relationship with Richardson ISD. The last 7 years in particular, we've worked with the communities there, building multi-activity centers, really trying to bolster the other aspects of different types of learning environments. And we were engaged on this project to really come in and create, additions to classrooms and create a connector between two buildings that were to be separated by a fire lane. And so we were pulled onto this project to really collaborate with the community there and really dive deep into a solution beyond what was initially asked, as we'll talk a little bit more.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that kind of geography as destiny and the separation of the two buildings and how that's changed some culture and behavior at the school. Colt, so you're an alum of the school and you took some architecture classes there and you're now an architecture student. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience with the high school?
Yes, so I went to Lake Highlands elementary school, junior high, and high school. So ran the whole system there.
Yeah.
That was exciting. Yes, so I went, obviously, like you said, all 4 years. I did architecture classes and program there, and that is sort of how I got in touch with this project and was able to, represent students and my peers. And yeah, it was a really exciting process. And now, obviously, I'm in architecture school. It's what, 4 years later now, Adelia, I think, some going on 4 years later.
Yeah.
And yeah, just super excited to be circling back. Every time I go home, I've gotten to see it just get taller and taller and more complete. So I am excited to be able to talk about all the great things that have happened since.
Fantastic. Jonathan.
All right, we're going to dig into the first question here to Casey. Casey, we know that the HKS team came on board to create new enrichment spaces in classrooms. Can you tell us a little bit about your perspective as it relates to that initial engagement, what that looked like, that initial engagement, and then the school's initial plans for what those new spaces would be?
Yes, and when we talk about the school and the planning process, the important thing was that we brought together everybody in the process. It wasn't Richardson ISD coming to us saying, hey, here's what your new school is going to look like. It was a process of saying, hey, community, students, teachers, staff, district, what do we need? How can we solve some problems? And so the whole concept behind the process was to bring us back to one school, one community. And if you can see actually on the picture, I'm glad it's there, I can actually talk about it. But we had two separate buildings. And when you have two buildings, you create two schools. When you create two schools, you create two communities. And Lake Highlands is not two communities, it is one. And so it gave us an opportunity to bring the school together. And we'll talk more about it a little bit later. But I mean, we even had two buildings. We had 3 cafeterias, and something as simple as having multiple cafeterias creates division in our students on campus. And so it gave us an opportunity to bring all that together. And I don't want to steal any thunder from Colt here, but there's some awesome things that I'm sure he's going to talk about. But I mean, even the concept of bringing these buildings together came from a student at Lake Highlands. And, so that was kind of what our thoughts were in the whole process.
Oh, that's great. And you mentioned right away, obviously, the focus on community and this idea that we were kind of tasked with solving the problems of the community need. When we think about explicit versus latent problems, I'm going to shift us to Adelia. Adelia, we understand that initially with the project, there were some plans, right? And then there was a significant shift from that initial concept or deliverable to where we ended up actually. Can you tell us a little bit about the discovery process that you and your team went through for how that transformational shift ended up occurring from where we thought we would start, right, to where we actually ended up?
Right. Yeah. So, the big ask initially, and this is really how we approach, all our work is, we start with the ask, but then we peel back and go in with no assumptions, right? And so I think Casey said it best, it's not about really any of us, it's all of us, all of you, all of the community, and making sure we get the voices at the table that are representative of the broader community from different socioeconomic backgrounds, the students, the staff, the family members. We had parents, teachers, the full gamut in these workshops, and there was a series of them. And what we like to do is, really dive deep into the process and engage all voices and really sit back and listen. And from that process, the initial ask was, addition of some classrooms and making a connection between the two buildings. But what really came out of that was identifying this, aligned need and mission from all of us in the room and beyond, representative of the community, to create a single community because it was divided. And as Casey said, the different cafeterias were creating some divisions within the community already, and then how can we then reimagine that through this process and all become aligned during the entire process all the way to design. And that carries through, that thread, that mission carried through, even down to the furniture. When we talk about sense of place, sense of belonging, sense of choice, rethinking what that essentially hub can bolster beyond just physical connection. It bolsters so much more than that. And then also, there's programmatic needs of, Casey mentioned 3,000 students. How do we have all of these members of the school community traverse from space to space and place to space, within the timelines that are required for them to get from class to class. So it was really creating, a destination, a hub that was very inclusive of all individuals in the community.
Yeah, that's great. Great question, Jonathan. And I want to pick up a little bit of Adelia's response and ask Casey. I mean, obviously, from an administration standpoint, there are goals that you have, and schools aren't just learning spaces anymore. They're social spaces. Can you talk a little bit about this need to have this space function from a social standpoint to also help integrate students and faculty? You mentioned earlier that there were two kind of separate buildings, and so there were teachers who didn't know or see other teachers, and there were students who wouldn't always see teachers. How is the building kind of helped with hyper collaboration and with students and faculty connecting from a social standpoint? Need you to unmute there.
You can think of it like this. If you're working in a building, how often have you walked over to the building next to you to meet people? You know what I mean? And so when you're two buildings, we had staff members that literally would never, ever have to come over to one side or one of the other buildings. Well, when they do that, you have teachers that never, ever meet each other. Same thing with students. We're asking students, we were two separate buildings divided by grades, and then we decided that we wanted to bring everything together, make one community. Well, now we made one community with two buildings, and we're asking students to do things, and Colt will attest as a student who had to do this. But I mean, it could be 105 degrees outside, it could be storming, could be raining, could be lightning, thunder, sleet, snow, it doesn't matter. They have to go to class. And here we are standing at the door waving, go to class, go out into the parking lot, go into the rain, go into the heat, and get over to your other class in 7 minutes, and don't be tardy. You know what I mean? It's like, so it really did create an issue for us. And so we had a need to be able to bring everything together. And kids have more of a desire to go to class now because they don't, kids aren't going to want to walk through rain to go to class. We don't want to walk through rain. And so teachers now have a desire to walk around the building. We even we're talking about the fact that it's 0.4 miles to go there and back twice, and to go from one end of the building to the other end and back is almost a half mile. So now we've got teachers that, believe it or not, before school, after school, are exercising in our building by walking it. And it's really brought people together. And there's been even times I've seen 10, 12, 15 teachers walking from one end to the next before school starts. And so it really has kind of brought together community within our school. We got teachers that now have ventured out of what was once their building now to the other building and seeing other things. And it all makes a difference.
That's fantastic. So in that original structure, right, ninth grade was in one building, and then was it 10, 11, and 12 in the second building? So it was, you're right, it almost sets up a whole kind of us them situation too.
It did.
Yeah. Hey, Colt, as a student who was involved in the discovery process, what were some of the needs that you identified or saw for your peers and the campus? And then I'd love for you to kind of tell us and the audience that did the discovery process, how did the discovery process help you understand what the existing space challenges were? And I also don't want you to be demure and shy, and tell us about your significant role. You were a catalyst in a lot of this project, right?
Sure. Yeah, we'll go with that.
Okay.
I appreciate it. No, I would say, I mean, just to touch on a quick point from Casey, yeah, it's hot. And I mean, even just outside of it being an inconvenience, we talked about previously about it being in sort of a barrier to learning. You have a 50-minute class. If I have to walk from the front of one building all the way around to the front of the other building in the rain and it's 90 plus, 100 plus degrees outside, I'm not focusing on math for the first 15 minutes of that class. I am focused on the fact that I am uncomfortable and my shoes are wet and my socks are probably wet too, or it's snowing and everything is just dirty. And so, it's a really big barrier to even just, wanting to learn or being in the right mind space to learn. And so even just having AC and a roof is already fantastic. And then everything that was able to happen past that was even better. But I would say a lot of my early times thinking about this, the then main principal of the school approached me about it. And when we started talking to it and I went back and started to sort of, just during my architecture class, my professor, I don't know if I should say this, he let me just walk around the school and really just observe. I didn't have to do what a lot of the other students were doing. And I was able to spend time really studying the spaces that I had been inhabiting for the 3.5 years previous. And um, it got to this point where I was spending a lot of times in what was called the student center and then the cafeteria, which were the two in the main high school building, and really starting to sort of observe and identify what the differences were, starting to think about who was in one and not the other. Free and reduced lunch was only in one of the spaces at the time. And so you already then set up this whole barrier of people. By the time the student center is smaller as well, and so by the time that I'm able to get through line to get free and reduced lunch, there's no space in the student center.
Wow.
So everybody who's on free and reduced lunch ended up sitting in the cafeteria unless somebody happened to save a seat for them that wasn't going through that lunch line.
So
And it was
there wasn't a blend. Those
no,
students
I
would
would
be.
say no, it was very much people rushed to get there because you're trying to get in line and get your food. And then everybody else, while you're waiting for your food, is already set down. And so the student center fills up quick. And I mean, there were people that I knew who were seniors with me that had never been even in the cafeteria during lunchtime, never once had even gone in there,
Wow.
never felt the need to, never had to. And there was just this huge divide between these sort of two nuclear centers of the campus. And I mean, it was no fault on anyone. It was the way the building was designed. It was spatial. The student center was way smaller. Like I said, the kitchen and the main cafeteria space was way bigger and could support the lines and could support all of those needed facilities. And it was a big issue. And so, really thinking about that and thinking about, well, we can't just not have cafeterias and we can't just bust down all these walls and make it one cafeteria. That's just not an option with the space we had. And so it was a lot of walking around with a really long tape measure outside and trying to figure out what spaces could be supported in between the buildings. At one point, I had this terrible idea to float something in between the two buildings, connect the second floors of the buildings, and it was not cost effective or safe because we were worried about the fire lanes. So it was a whole process to sort of come through and hand measure most of the high school and try to figure out what can go where and who can we fit here, how many classrooms can we infill, because obviously this whole thing was about getting classrooms. And so it was basically, if we can get the classrooms, what else could we do, which is really where my mind was. So as long as we could fit, I think it was 24, Delia, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 24 classrooms.
Yep.
and trying to just fit all of those. And if we could backfill those into the library, and because we had 2 libraries, 3 cafeterias, and 1 community, and basically 1 high school. And so if we could just eliminate those and make those classrooms, what could we do with all that new space that we can create in between the buildings while
Yeah.
not having to walk through the rain?
Yeah, well, I love that your immersion into architecture and design happened in a very real world setting. And so big shout out to that teacher who,
Well,
kind of gave you that latitude. So
and I just want to say I got to architecture school and it was nothing like that. So it definitely built my expectations
there
up
you
and then
go.
just knocked my legs out from under me
Yeah,
very
well, that's what
quickly.
higher ed's for.
Definitely.
Thank you for that, Cole. Jonathan.
Yeah, building on that a little bit and shifting back to Adelia, Adelia, you mentioned earlier, we start with the ask, and then we really do the right work to start with no assumptions, right? And remove assumptions. And then when we think about all the things that Colt and Casey just shared, you start to build this kind of like complex web, right? So let us into your mind a little bit as it relates to strategies. So now we want to empathize, right? And we want to understand stakeholders and the layers of stakeholders. What strategies did you guys use within the initial exploration? How did you work with the district to determine stakeholders? And then beyond that, even, how do you begin to knit the spaces together?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're right. It's a big undertaking that we are all in, right? And so there's there's many priorities, right? And so it's helping the community, helping the district really kind of identify those priorities, because in the end, you do have a budget, and in the end, you have to design to that budget and to those expectations and align everything, right? So there's a continued rigor that needs to happen through that exploration process. And so we like to first dream big. Colt mentioned, creating these connections above. I mean, we really try to think of, outside the box, because when you really start to look at it in those terms, before you start putting all these kind of restrictions to it, then you come up with innovations, and you can scale those ideas that are appropriate, that are aligned with the vision, are aligned with the priorities. And so as far as like stitching this whole space together, I mean, we did so many studies on circulation paths, and there's a lot of data that we pulled and pushed and pulled. We even looked at evidence-based design, some white papers that identified student choice in cafeterias and dining seating, and what's the right mesh and mix of to maximize the experience and the flow, and then also putting in program spaces that weren't necessarily expected. So really the campus had, Colt mentioned this as well, had duplicated rooms. It was duplicate cafeterias, libraries, science labs. So it really did lead to this unintentional kind of student segregation, and left teachers, like Casey said, in opposite corners of the buildings. And one big thing that came to fruition as well is they had no place for outdoors to socialize. There was no outdoor kind of places to have these impromptu meetings or maybe outdoor learning. And it was complicated floor plans that essentially exacerbated the sense of disconnect. So the design solution then was, how do we, we're going to add this library, which is a learning commons, and then that can flow into these flex spaces. And so a cafeteria is no longer a cafeteria. It becomes this really big community hub that incorporates all these different programmatic necessities within the same space. So really this hub was designed, and it was a place in place of where the buildings used to be divided. So it's a single dining open space with a commons area, stitching all those pieces together where students can eat lunch. I don't know if you see on the right, the monumental staircase, the learning stair, where there could be, classes held or different size learning groups. And booths, there's reading niches that are carved out throughout the corridors. So there's that sense of, touchdown, respite, repose, take a quick break as you move through spaces. And then also the former cafeterias, Colt mentioned, an adjacent hall space, we kind of merged into the central library on the upper left, as you can see too, but in between having those flex spaces. So again, carving out physical spaces and places that really bolster the sense of community and that are also used for flexible functions, I think was really important as well. So when kids aren't traversing through, the cafeteria or not during those times, there's other places that people can connect and make those the real connections that we're missing in the beginning.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that I gleaned out of that right away was this idea of beginning by dreaming without constraint. And I'm going to shift us back to Casey here. Casey, you're an associate principal in a high school, and I think hopefully we see kiddos that age dreaming without constraint all the time. I don't know if that always happens. When you think about the ways that the project revealed things about the way students were connecting to each other, to campus, what did you guys learn through the process about the student body and how they use space and how they connect and all those kind of juicy, bigger things, if you will?
Yes. And so, prior to this, they weren't. That's the thing. They weren't connecting. There was a separation. There was a divide on the campus. And, Colt said it best when he was like, when free and reduced lunch is only offered in one cafeteria, well, your kids that don't have money have to go there. And therefore that now pushes the other kids that have money into another cafeteria. And now you've divided your school by socioeconomic status. And that's the worst thing you can do. You don't want that. And so we needed these spaces. And I don't want to forget, it kind of strays a little bit out of the way here, but I want to forget, but like Colt was just talking, as a student on the campus, was walking the campus, designing, implementing, creating, coming up with ideas, reaching out to architects. I mean, that's what we have in our campuses, and that's what we need to be able to enable them to do. And when you have a student, that literally has the capability to work on the design process for flexible in area that brings all of our students together, then we need to be able to utilize that. And we now have that opportunity. We have that opportunity in the flexible spaces. And if you can see in the top left on that picture, we call it the learning stairs. We actually use that as a classroom this year. We had a teacher that was like, hey, I don't need a classroom with walls. Can I have that? And we're like, yeah. So third period, every single day, we had a class on those stairs. And so it has opened up people's minds to want to be able to come together and reach out and go to places and things that they haven't in the past. I mean, you'll be hard pressed to find many schools in this country that had a student on their campus design their reconstruction of their campus based on what was discussed through the community. So, it's just, to me, it's just an amazing process to know that, and I'm just honored to be sitting here with Colt right now. You know what I mean? And it sounds so cheesy, and I know he doesn't build himself up, but I'm just honored to be sitting with what was a student on our campus designing what I'm literally sitting in right now. I'm actually zooming from the middle of this space that you're looking on the screen right now. My office is in the corner of this picture right here. So I think it's just an amazing concept. And I think we need to be reminded to tap into the resources we have on our campus, which is not just staff and it's not just community, but it's also our students,
100%. Yeah, agency, student agency, and accepting that all humans, regardless of where we're coming from, socioeconomically, have agency, and how do we design for that and promote that? I agree with you 100% on the how lucky are we to be sitting here with Colt?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah,
Cheryl?
I'm blushing. Y'all need to stop.
I love that shout out of Colt, and I knew you weren't going to say that about yourself. So thank you, Casey, for doing that. And it's just such a great example of, at that time, Colt, you were a student completely embedded in the problem that a design solution was waiting for. And you've already talked about, Casey addressed kind of the further stratifying of socioeconomics of the student population, the need to bring together students and faculty, kind of that separateness of the two buildings. Again, in that moment when you were embedded, what were some other issues and challenges? We already talked about hashtag Texas weather and getting from point A to point B. What were some other challenges that you came across as you were investigating the existing space?
Man, what do I say without incriminating myself?
You're in a safe space. It's totally safe space here.
There were a lot. And it's, again, I just want to preface that, I mean, we we being the community, the faculty, the administration, the students, we're working with what we had. It's not like Casey came in one day and was like, we're going to make 2 buildings and we're going to say that nobody can talk to each other. It wasn't. And so all these things to say is I definitely think there was a big issue with this division of spaces, and then also these sort of thrown away spaces. If anybody, I know we don't have a floor plan of the building, but if anybody could see the floor plan of the building, you could see there's a lot of wasted space. There's a lot of dead ends and dead zones. And when you have spaces where there were, frankly, at the back of the building near where my architecture class was, there were a lot of those dead spaces back in what was then G Hall. I don't know what it's called now, but students didn't want to walk to the other building. So they'd hang out in G Hall. And instead of learning, you have basically this just group of people hanging out. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to go to school from 8 to 4 every day. I get it. But it's basically like when we have this division of spaces, even just, I mean, circling back to weather or circling back to not wanting to go to class, when you have these spaces that don't support the students, the students don't want to learn. And then to flip flop that, if the teachers hate the building they're teaching in, they're not going to enjoy teaching. I mean, beyond their own just internal passion, they're not going to want to teach well and doing it for years and years. And that's not to, again, not to indict anyone, but when you create spaces that enable the students to have increased accessibility and access to each other and to their spaces, you also sort of improve morale. And there was a lot of this lack of, we were in an older building, we were the 4th high school in the district to get any additions or renovations. So there was also that sort of, at the student level, we knew that we were the last ones. And that was just how the bid packets and the bonds went and stuff. So it wasn't like they were like, Lake Highlands, we're not gonna support them. It was just a lot of, we knew what was coming, and there was a lot of people that were waiting for it. And the people that didn't know just knew the spaces they had and were not content with the spaces they had.
Yeah.
And then to follow up Adelia's point, you couldn't go outside. Because the only time you could go outside was between classes, because when you have 2 cafeterias, you have twice the amount of people that need to watch these. And so we had some internal courtyards inside of the high school space, but you don't have enough expendable faculty without asking them to sacrifice their lunches or their time for a break. You can't use we couldn't take advantage of those spaces because we were stretched so thin between 2 buildings and multiple sites, and you only had so many SROs and principals and teachers who didn't have a class. And it became where we were sort of confined to the 4 walls, if you will, of the building, and it got old.
So, yeah, I hear you. You sort of had a kind of perfect internal culture storm that could have been brewing. But then, Adelia, it was also the perfect blend of a dedicated school district, a school that was very eager to learn how to be better and craft a better experience for students and faculty. And then you had a very deeply engaged body of stakeholders who wanted to have this conversation. So you had that perfect blend to support the redesign of the school. How did all of this impact the work that you did and HKS did, and get that better sense of school culture and kind of the next steps?
Can I just jump in very quickly?
Yeah.
I just also
Please.
want to say, and a design team that was super open to listening.
Yeah,
And that was a
absolutely.
very huge factor.
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, because you needed all of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really many different aspects kind of coming together at once. And I think so, kind of peeling back the questions, impact the sense of school culture and what was needed. I think it made it so much easier because we were all in the same reason. So every time we had check-ins or conversations, we would kind of allude back to the alignment sessions in the very beginning. So I think the impact that we ended up making in the design solution really was the outcome of the community being so honest and transparent. And I think there's a sense of humility when we can sit back and say, you know what, something is not right here. And so I think Colt is a perfect example. He's a direct outcome of the power of the faculty there, the staff, the teachers, really living and breathing the mission of the school. And I think that was a big part of the whole process. Is we were able to, excitingly, we were able to really make an impact in the community, and that's really all that we're about, right? And at the end of the day, it really is about, did we do what we set out to do? And there's little things here and there that I'm sure, you know, we can always learn from, and we can always do better. And we know that, and we want to know those things, right? So we can always improve. But I think just in general, it's almost humbling for us to be part of this process and be partners with the district and have that really vested relationship that we have in you know, throughout the entire process, and we'll continue to. I mean, we'll always, you know, look back and make sure, you know, what could we have done different, or what can we do better, or you know, what is the next iteration of building and bolstering this community, and how can we, you know, help foster that.
Were there any surprises?
So
Everybody's favorite question.
surprises, yeah, that one's always hard, because I think to say there was no surprise would be silly. There's so many surprises along the way, right? Because if you really have to have like this quick pivot growth mindset during design, right?
Yeah.
So once there's a solution and something else changes and something else shifts, having the ability to pivot quickly in design thinking and saying, all right, this does impact this may not work anymore. This is a great idea a week ago, but now that we've shifted things, you know, design is kind of this composition, right? And that's beyond spatial qualities. It's sort of this psychological composition as well. So, you know, how do we, if we're changing, for example, you know, the graphics, or, you know, we added a lot of biophilic elements, and the tree perch, you know, on that bridge connector was a really big thing, is so students could kind of be in this abstracted tree perch and looking over down into the hub. So it's, you know, when one thing shifts, how can you engage, or how can you pivot quickly to make it even better? And that was a constant throughout the entire, so we're always ready for surprises, and we're, so yeah, I would say that's kind of a general
That's fine.
response.
Totally fine. Jonathan, let's head back over to you. And I think we'll work in a few more questions before we open up to the audience.
Yeah. So, Adelia, you mentioned kind of this idea that design is this great teacher, and if we're willing to learn from it. Now, Casey, talk to us a little bit about that kind of first. We've got this opportunity now, right? Students are talking. I think you're going to tell us a little bit about what it was like this past year with students being in it or not in it. But how have the students responded to the space? What is it teaching us? And then if you can touch specifically on that culture topic. We've been talking about it, obviously, but how is it really fostering the cultural objectives that we diagnose now?
Yeah, well, I'll start off with a little funny comment here, because when the building was scheduled to be open, and we all know construction sometimes runs a little behind. It was scheduled to be open well before our teachers returned to campus and students and everybody. Well, it wasn't ready. So they still had to work some things in. And it was really funny because everybody was so excited. This has been such a needed change for our community. People were so excited that literally we would sit back as admin and we would tell people, you can't go in. That's a hard hat area. You can't go here. And we'd watch parents and students that are up for practice and teachers sneaking around like they're trying to catch the next UFO project from the government, you know, trying to see what does it look like, because we're like, you can't go in there. And so the excitement was so big. And then, of course, with COVID, you know, we were in a pandemic. And so we ran about a 55%, anywhere between 50 and 60% of our students were on campus. And so we kind of got a little trial run. But even being that it was a trial run, like I said, it was great to see our teachers starting to venture out and see other parts of the building. We had students that it was amazing because we were so curious about how are the students going to respond, because we've had our, you know, the low SES or the low SES and high SES separation, the SES, you know, separation between our cafeterias. And now all of a sudden, boom, hey guys, here's your lunch. And it's one giant space. And so the students, it was awesome because where we had students that were separated socially or by their economic status now are sitting at tables next to each other in one cafeteria, and it worked together. And so, you know, we were able to, with COVID, almost get like a little trial run and kind of test what works, what doesn't work, what's going to be the hot spots, where a kid's going to hide. You know, Colt talked a little bit about how kids like to hide back in G Hall because that was the area nobody wanted to be. Admin didn't want to go back there. You know what I mean? And so just so you know, Colt, we have drastically transformed G Hall. It now has your architecture lab that you're working in is now right next to our construction lab and animation, which are all multi-million-dollar facilities now. And now everybody wants to be back there because it's so great. But, you know, it was awesome because now it seems like kids want to be on campus. Matter of fact, we actually had to make a rule because of COVID that kids couldn't show up until 8:30. Like you cannot come onto campus before 8:30 because they wanted to be here. They wanted to be on campus. But we couldn't have them come on campus because we didn't have a way to watch them, keep them separated, keep them socially distanced. We didn't have the staff to do that. And so the district kind of had a policy where we wanted kids to come right, 8:30 or later before our school opens. That way we have staff to be able to monitor. But I mean, kids, if we didn't say that, we had 150 kids standing in our door waiting to come in. And so the kids want to come and they sit in that cafeteria and they sit on the learning stairs and they go out to the courtyard and they sit. And it's a space that now people want to be in. And when people want to be in it, it makes it awesome for us. I mean, we're even getting requests now that we're fully open. We've got like 4 different professional developments from all over the district happening in our building over the next couple of weeks because the space is so well designed, so central and so organized that, we're hosting events. We've had community events come in here. Obviously, we were limited because of COVID, but we've had community events and community outreach and all kinds of things come and use this very space that we're sitting in right now. So that you see on the screen.
Yeah. Well, I tell you one thing I can't pick up on is there's no excitement associated with any of it.
No.
And Colt, I'm gonna play off that excitement thing, right? So you're now finishing your final year-ish at Georgia Tech as an architecture student. When we think about kind of ready, aim, fire, did this experience for you? Did it start it for you? Did it just put you further down the road? How did this help you personally?
I definitely think I realized it was too late to turn back. No, it definitely relit a fire in me that obviously I'd been doing architecture sort of studies and drafting and design throughout high school. And this really just reaffirmed what I wanted to do and sort of my passion for it. Did I get really lucky with a great team, with great stakeholders and all of that? Yes, most definitely. I definitely think that if any of the factors had been subtracted, it would not have been the same experience for anyone, I don't think. And so it definitely just sort of made the fire burn brighter, if you will, and really made me, just nose down and just focus and then get ready for obviously my undergrad. And like I said earlier, it definitely set up a lot of unrealistic expectations for what design education is like, but it's something that in my mind at least I always return to remind me sort of the things we thought about in the process and sort of what it's all worth, because with any design degree it is a lot. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of hours, and it's for things like this. It's so we can do great things and improve communities. And it's something that, like I said, now 4 years later, or going on 4 years later, has continued to inspire me and make me want to work harder so I can do things like this.
That's great. That's great. It's Jonathan, let's open up for some questions from the audience. And I know a number of people are asking, let's get a sense of timeline, and any of you who can and let us know kind of when did this start and what's the process, what's phase? Can someone address timeline of this project? Adelia, maybe? Can you start us off on timeline?
So, I'm drawing. Okay, so it's been about 3 years really from the very, very beginning, because so the other thing is, we had a multi-activity center that was a little north of that happened as well. And there were 3 other multi-activity centers that we had been doing throughout the district. So for us, it's been several years that we've been, highly engaged with the district. And so, like Casey said, this was all done in one fell swoop. It wasn't, necessarily phased out. We did have the second phase though, although I will say that the hub was first. multi-activity center and hub, and then the next phase was actually the classroom renovations. But it was right after. So to your point, Casey, that all finished in August, essentially, with, you know, little things here and there, but we were able to achieve the project, you know, pretty holistically, and really align it pretty smartly to where we could even get through a pandemic during construction and final outcome. So we're very excited to all come back in this space and come and visit the school as well. I mean, we've been out there constantly throughout the entire process, seeing it grow and grow. I would say something that we talked about surprises, but what a really exciting thing, in case you can speak to this, is when the music is being played between classes, I think is so lovely. I'll let Casey talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I would have never even thought of, even though I'm kind of a music and DJ type guy, but it was that they installed its own independent speaker system to work for the projectors in the two different areas of the hub. And with that came a Bluetooth audio player. And so we started just kind of playing music. And of course, you know, music is amazing, and music can control the way kids behave and the way kids act and the way they respond. Music can make you excited, can make you sad, can make you happy, can make you relaxed. And so we play music, and we actually have since, as part of our, you know, building one community, our Dallas SROs, which are Dallas Police Department. We actually have an officer assigned to the music selection. So we have Motown Mondays, you know, we have Tejano Tuesdays, we have Workout Wednesdays, you know, we have Throwback Thursdays, and they've created a theme for the music. And so the kids even know what theme of music is going to be playing when they come in for lunchtime. We'll do it during passing periods, along with a microphone in the central area that there's speakers all around. And so it's almost like, you know, the kids never know where you are, but they can hear you because you're talking on a microphone, but it's such a big space, they can't see you. And so it's kind of fun to just, all right, guys, let's keep moving. Got to move, got to go. And they have no idea where you are, but they're moving, you know? And so I just think it was amazing. And the music is just, it was a game changer in my opinion, but.
That's great. Thank you for that. This has popped up a couple of times. Has COVID changed any of the design choices that were made in the project? So Adelia, you talked about kind of over that 3-year period. Obviously, toward the end of that, you know, we had the onset of the pandemic. So did COVID change any of your choices?
So it's interesting because most of the choices really were made kind of before it all, you know,
Right.
spiraled. But what I think is extremely aligned. So if you take the pandemic out of kind of design thinking, and we build, you know, educational facilities, we want them to last for hundreds of years, right? Because I mean, we don't have the luxury of, you know, or nor do we want to. We want to make sure that our communities are socially resilient, as well as our buildings are smart, sustainable, environmentally smart, and resilient into the future. So it worked with it being such a large, flexible space. I mean, flexibility is one thing that we understand is important, because, you know, technology is rapidly changing the future of education, how we reimagine our learning environments, you know, our indoor outdoor connections. I did see a question about outdoor spaces. There's a courtyard that the multi-activity center and the library, kind of the learning commons and the dining learning stair sort of engulf. And so there is outdoor spaces that kids can go out and eat and, you know, have like a little classroom. There's also a Zen garden that, you know, due to safety, physical kind of barriers, it's a visual Zen garden. So when you're having the dining experience, you can look outside to the planting and the landscape out there, but you don't see into the parking lot. So there's some visual block as well. But yeah, kind of circling back, I mean, it is designed to be this really open, flexible, multi-use. Yet we were very intentional with the circulation pass. We talk about inclusivity and making sure that, you know, kids that may be wheelchair bound, you know, it's all those things that are very obvious to us when we design, but also something that are really critical to think about each individual experience and helping them kind of navigate through the spaces without it being too refined to where it's not flexible. So I think, as far as the pandemic's concerned, I think it works. And it's also because it's a very large hub. And Casey, you can probably speak to it as well. I mean, we see the tape lines and, the signage and everything that's so critical for the physical safety. But then the psychological safety, I think, is the exciting part too, that I think is really we're able to do that in a space like that.
Yeah. You addressed about 4 questions that are in the Q&A with that answer, and I'm really happy you did. Thank you for touching on the outdoor spaces. I do want to pull out a word that you used, equity and inclusion, and how did the HKS team work with the school? And Casey brought it up when he was talking about, both Casey and Colt did, and just kind of that stratification of the previous stratification of students by their socioeconomic status with the lunchrooms. But how did you incorporate innovation around equity and inclusion, and how'd you have those conversations with faculty, with students, with administration?
So, those conversations we have them on every single project, and we're very, very very cognizant of how to kind of have those conversations. And I think that alignment session in the very beginning was kind of a no-brainer. We all were very much, our mission was to make sure that it was an inclusive environment. It was a diverse environment that allows for not only the physical safety but psychological safety as well. And then thinking about when we did all those data calculations of circulation paths, thinking of really all individuals. So we have kind of this persona mapping that we do, and it's taking many different personas of students of different capabilities and abilities, and really creating a persona, and then imagining that persona, traversing from space to space in different scenarios. So whether it's a staff member, whether it's a student, whether it's someone with special needs, or just thinking of really the whole person, and trying to design for every unique individual, I think was something that we talked about specifically when we were looking at the circulation and the movement from place to place.
Yeah, perfect. Casey, this question is for you, from someone in the audience. What's the future of the school looking like now? What are you feeling about the future of the program, of the school, for the students, with shifts in culture, and now that you are this one community? What are you predicting for the future for your school?
Well, I mean, honestly, I couldn't be more excited. And I know that's kind of cliche because everybody always, we're so excited, but it's like really, truly, like, this is it. This is our first year to really open up as one community, one school, because last year was COVID, and we all know that. And it wasn't all the kids. And we have 1,200 to 1,300 kids that were on our campus last year as students that have never seen this building because they were on virtual. And so, we had some teachers that would walk around and, on the Zoom would be showing kids the stuff, but it's like, wow, still not real, And so the future is really bright, for us, because we've got a chance, kids have to feel safe. They have to want to be there. The teachers have to want to be there. The culture has to exist, and it has to be a positive culture in order for there to be successful learning. You can't teach a kid that doesn't want to be there. You can't teach a teacher can't teach if they're not interested in being in the building. So now we have that safe place. We have a good culture. We have a positive, just a positive vibe around the building. Now we have the ability to take these kids, find out what they need, find out how we can help them, and get them helped, and get them help, and get them ready, get them college and career ready, and get them ready for the next generation.
That's good. Colt, any last thoughts from you about the future of your alma mater?
No, I just want to build off of, I think Casey said something really great there, is sort of identifying and targeting needs, but also not just needs, but empowerment as well. I wouldn't have been able to do any of this if I wasn't empowered by by the team, by people who wanted to listen. And now that the school is, evolving, the capacity to listen and to grow is clearer than it was before. And so I am looking forward to seeing other Lake Highlands grads on panels like these or and things like this before too long. And I'm hoping that and know that the space will facilitate that. And so I think the biggest thing for me was, there was a very clear issue. And obviously just, this could be just a band-aid on a gunshot wound because all you did was just combine the spaces, but without the work of, the HKS team to constantly make this better, the administration and the faculty to really empower the space as well for learning and for connection and things like that, it would just be another room and it would be a fancy new room and nothing more. And if all the legwork wasn't done by the people currently in the space, the HKS team for fully designing something that was like Adelia said, just a simple model, just a very simple drawing became something that's fantastic and hopefully making a lot of people's lives better. So yeah, thank you for letting me come in here and rant about some of those things.
No, it was perfect. And Jonathan, let me just toss it to you. If you've got to, as our host, any last thoughts about
Yeah.
this team, this project?
We have a saying in our own home, my wife and I, for our children. Saying is saying, doing is doing. I can't tell you, Cheryl, you can resonate with this. We get to the benefit of what we do sometimes is getting to see this broad landscape. I mean, the amount of times that you guys gave me not just goosebumps, but Google searches. That's a joke for KI. I'm not relocating to Texas. But hats off. I mean, you guys, you so thoroughly did great design. And this idea that Adelia, you speaking over and over again about just design as that teacher. I'm so excited for where you guys will go, Colt. There's going to be other Colts because of what you guys have done, right? Which is so powerful. That's what we're out for from a KI perspective is being a part of these things. So hats off to you guys. You should be very proud. And the two most powerful words we can say in the English language are thank you. So thank you guys for what you've done.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that, Jonathan. Casey, thank you for being a champion for process and procedure and for the building, singular, not plural. And Colt, you're phenomenal. You've got a fan club in the audience. And Adelia, you are just a champion of design. And I think sometimes we often use the words design matters and we toss it around, but this is a true example that design indeed does matter. In the history and legacy of learning and in people and students. And so thank you to a stellar panel. Thank you to my co-host, Jonathan. Thank you to our host for the program, KI, and thank you to the audience. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you all soon.